Hi, my name is Paula Deckers, and I am the owner of the Northwest Bridal Showcase. And today I am with Alan Chitlick of Puget Sound DJ. And one of the things that we wanted to talk about today is hiring a professional wedding DJ for your wedding or special event. Alan, the first question that you wanted me to ask you about was, say you've just gotten engaged, you're planning a wedding. You think that you need to start with a foundation before you go off and perhaps hire, wedding vendors for your event. What is that foundation? What does that look like?
Well, I think there's a whole lot of decisions that sort of need to be made up front, and it's a good opportunity for a couple to practice their communication skills. But do they want a big wedding or a small wedding? Do they want a summer wedding or an off-season wedding? Do they want religious, not so religious? Do they want elope? They want here, indoors, outdoors? There's a lot of those things that all have to come together. And in my observation, couples who are dating, they don't have too many tough decisions. It's like, where are we going to go tonight?
What's for dinner tonight? Yeah,
exactly.
Where are we hanging out?
What movie we're going to go to? But then when you get into wedding planning, it gets a little more challenging, and it's a lot more like what being married is kind of like too, where you've got bigger decisions to make. And so maybe somebody likes the idea of getting married outdoors, but the other person likes the idea of indoors, or has a special date they want. And so it promotes an opportunity to communicate, I think. And in my observation, a couple's just got to come to an agreement on what they want to do with those kind of things. First, right. Yeah, that's really the first step you've got to do. And it's hard, it's not necessarily easy, but once you do that, you can really then start to focus on venues and dates. And then when you get that nailed, it's a big sigh of relief. All your friends will quit bugging you. Right. When are you getting married? When are you getting married?
Right.
And I believe that that's really the time that you can start moving on to the rest of the vendors, the photographers and the DJs and the videographers and the caterers and the florists and all those things. But I believe that starting with that foundation helps you make the other decisions better because you sort of know what your wedding's going to be like.
Yeah, no, and I agree. I think you do have to set a foundation, and all those kind of big details need to be decided first before you go off onto all the little avenues that create the entire event.
Yeah.
So I think that's a great question to have asked, and thank you for filling us in on that. You also wanted us to know, what are some of the things that couples should know when they start to look for a DJ?
Well, I think that most people associate DJ equals music. And that's certainly true, but it's also true that most good professional DJs do a lot more for a couple and are way more involved in the planning. If you think about the role of an MC that the DJ is going to play, that is so instrumental to what a wedding's going to be like. Right. And that's the person who's going to be reflecting you as a couple.
Right.
As the MC, the way
they're announcing you, right? They're your presence.
Absolutely, they're announcing, and in many cases, there's a lot of communication that the DJ should be doing, at least, with all the other vendors. You don't want to introduce the couple for their grand entrance if the food's not quite ready, if you're planning to go, send them to the buffet.
Right. So it's a timing issue.
It's timing, and it's all of that. So it's not just, here's the DJ who's going to play a couple hours worth of good dance music. I would say all professional wedding DJs can kind of play music like that.
Sure.
If you can't do that, you probably should not be a DJ. So if I'm a couple, one of the things that I want to look for is, what else can they do? How else do they help my event, my wedding go great? And
well, and this leads me into the point, and I've discussed it with the photographers as well. When you're hiring a wedding professional, you're looking for somebody who is a professional. They know what they're doing, and it's not like having your friend come and play iTunes at your wedding. They're actually doing a lot more for you than, like you said, than just spinning music. They're coordinating with the other vendors. It's a timing issue. They're making announcements that basically represent who the bride and groom are at that moment. And you want somebody who's going to be really professional.
Yeah. And I spend a lot of time myself with couples trying to work through their timeline and making sure that the flow is what they want. So in some cases, a couple really wants to emphasize the nature and the beauty. So maybe they have a little bit more of a longer cocktail hour outside or something like that. In other cases, a couple may want to really show off the food. They love the caterer or whatever.
Right.
So maybe you let dinner go on a little longer. Other cases, we want the party, right? So you're kind of maybe getting a little more of a brisk pace so that you really get to that dancing for the couple. So you want to, as a couple, be able to communicate that, and then you want to have confidence that somebody is helping you get that and sort of leading that timeline on your wedding night to make sure you get what you want.
Right. So what are some of the questions they should ask when hiring a professional wedding DJ like yourself?
I think overall, I would want to make sure that I have a good feel for who that DJ is and how our personalities match. I believe that because that person is reflecting you as the MC and sort of the pace of the event, you really want to know that you've got confidence in them. So I would just have some basic conversations about why they're a DJ. What do they like about it? What are they good at? How are they trying to get better at it?
Maybe how long they've been doing it, some of their other experience besides weddings,
Yeah,
perhaps?
absolutely.
Yeah.
I think an interesting question to ask almost any wedding vendor is, tell me about your last wedding.
Oh, what a great question. I never thought of that.
Because if they start talking about their equipment, or they start talking about, oh, I'm glad we got done early, or they start, you have a little window into what somebody's values are. But if they start talking about that couple and how excited they were to work with them and how great it was for them to get this, then you sort of know that that professional is really thinking about that couple, not just weddings.
Well, perhaps thinking about you if you were to hire them as a couple.
Exactly.
Yeah, that you're going to be of importance, or that the couple will be of importance to the vendor.
And I think for a lot of couples, it is a challenge to get their personality reflected on their wedding day, because there's a lot of traditions and there's a lot of ways that things that weddings often flow that are very similar. You usually have a first dance, you usually have an entrance, you usually have a cake cutting. There are certain elements that come, and so how do you reflect who you are? Some of that can be decor, but others of it can be different activities that you add, or maybe traditions that don't mean anything to you that you exclude. But it's nice to be working with someone as a DJ who you feel like gets your goals, gets your personality, and then can sort of help shape what you want to do on that night to get you there.
Right. And the feel of the wedding itself.
Absolutely.
And understanding, like you just said, what they're looking for.
Yeah.
So, okay, great. So, Alan, you've done the show before, and one of the questions you wanted us to ask is, so you're a bride, you've gotten engaged, you're going out to a wedding show. When you get there, there's obviously going to be more than one DJ, more than one photographer. How do you, what's the words you encourage or you're wanting the brides and grooms to ask about, like, when they walk through the show, how do they pick a wedding DJ out of all the wedding DJs that might be at that event?
Yeah, so I think, as I've said before, I think a personality match is very important. And my observation is that sometimes the people act at a wedding show the way they might just act at your wedding, right? And so if someone is very pushy and aggressive at a show, okay, I'll have this show special for you for the next 45 minutes, and they're really trying to get you to sign on the dotted line, I bet they're going to be aggressive and pushy to your guests. If they are so laid back that they don't even seem interested at a show, if they don't seem like they're engaging, I think they're going to probably be the kind of DJ that is not really very compelling to your guests at a wedding.
Yeah.
If you stand there and the DJ just talks, doesn't ask you questions about who you are and what you want, and they just want to tell you about how great they are and how they can uplight this wall and that kind of thing, they're probably going to be the kind of DJ who's just talking to hear himself talk on the mic all night,
which can be really annoying.
It is really annoying. I hear that all the time.
Yeah, I've been to weddings where literally having the right DJ can set a great mood for your wedding, or it can really ruin it. And I totally agree with you. I think finding a person that fits your personality and your goals and your ideas for your wedding is right up there at the top. It's got to be the first couple of the questions that you ask when hiring a professional.
Yeah, and for me, I don't like the idea of a cookie cutter wedding. I like to get to know a couple and make that really unique for them. And some of that is what I was saying before about the agenda and the timeline, but also the music that they pick and
Their style of
yeah. And if couples want to reflect who they are by the music they select, I think that's great.
Yes.
And
Yeah.
a lot of times maybe it's not danceable, but you know what? You can play that at cocktail hour. You can play that at dinner. People don't even realize they have time while guests are being seated before the ceremony. There's a cake cutting song. I mean, there's lots of places where you can dart in and put your little stamp on the music and have your personality reflected in
So
that.
you just said something a minute ago, and I think it's really important. You as a DJ, what are the questions that you ask your bride and groom or couples when they're hiring you for an event? What are the things that you ask them to find out what their ideas are, what their goals are for their wedding or event?
I often ask them to come up with some words to describe what they want it to be like. And so sometimes they'll say elegant and formal, and sometimes they'll say casual and easy flowing, or whatever they say. That gives me a little bit of a window. Sometimes I will ask them what weddings that they've been to that they really enjoyed and why, and what weddings they've been to that they didn't like so much and why. And I try to just get to know them as a couple, hear a little bit more about their relationship, how they get along, how they make decisions, how they got met, how they got engaged, because all of that helps me sort of make some recommendations on how to approach their wedding. But that, to me, is how I sort of figure out what people's different personalities are like.
Right, which is important. So it's not only important for them to ask you questions, but it's also important for the vendor, the specialist, that they're hiring to ask them questions as well and get all that information that really sets them apart from the last couple or the couple that's next.
And if a couple doesn't sense that, if a couple doesn't sense that the DJ or really other wedding professionals are trying to learn who they are as a couple, then what they're signing up for is essentially a pretty generic commodity. I'm going to play old time rock and roll and then celebration, and I'm going to say this is something that I'm going to say bride and groom all the time instead of Andrea and John or whatever, because I haven't taken the time to get to know Andrea and John that well, right?
Yep, exactly.
So I think as a couple, you probably get a sense about how committed that vendor is, whether it's a DJ or somebody else, to learning about you and giving you the wedding that you want.
Right. Yes, and I think that's all really, really great information. It really does lead back to your relationships and, getting an understanding and, understanding how you feel about what you do and about them as a couple.
Yeah.
So, well, my last question to you is, you have been producing a Grooms Workshop.
Yeah.
How many years has that been now?
We did our first one 2 years ago, maybe 3 years ago.
3 years ago. Okay. And what does that entail for a groom? It's strictly for grooms. What does that look like for a groom?
So it's a couple hours where we get a bunch of grooms together, and it's very interactive, but we try to help grooms catch up a little bit with all of the wedding planning. Like, I think there's a lot of disparity where many brides, not every single one, but many brides have been thinking about their wedding for a very, very long time.
And the men not so much?
Yes. and I don't think that's always true, but it's kind of true a lot. And so I think it can be very intimidating for men to come into this world of wedding planning.
Right.
And some of it's very foreign. So I usually work with a team of other vendors from different fields to sort of give them different perspectives. And it's literally a workshop where people talk about where they are, what they are intimidated by, what they've been doing so far. And we give people ideas about how to get involved and that kind of thing.
What a great resource. I love that, because I think you're right. I mean, it's not only overwhelming for the bride and anybody that might be helping her do the planning, but I just love that you're giving the grooms a specific education to help them assist their bride in that whole process.
And I think weddings always go better when it's a team effort.
Absolutely.
And that dynamic of sometimes where a groom can just say, oh yeah, dear, whatever you want, it's your wedding. I don't think that's very healthy. I
Well,
don't
and
think
I
that's
don't
going to
think
help them get a
it's
very
not
good
realistic
wedding.
either. Honestly, it's really not. I do think that men care more than they sometimes let on.
Yeah.
I think that it's a bigger deal than they really want to, but they don't want to get in the way perhaps, or maybe they just don't know enough to make a decision and they just defer because they don't want to get in trouble with making
Yeah.
the wrong decision. So I love that you're providing that service. And when's the next one?
We believe February at the Pyramid Brewery.
Okay, fantastic. Maybe we'll post some information
Yeah.
about that. Well, thank you, Alan, so much.
You're so welcome,
It's so
Paulette.
awesome to talk to another wedding professional and get all these great tips.
I sure appreciate the time.
No problem. And we'll talk to you soon.
Sounds great.